Good day, this is PhD 201 Biostatistics. I'll be taking you through study section 4, Sample and Sampling. When you have studied this section, you should be able to define sampling and its types. You should be able to describe the various sampling methods. And lastly, you should be able to highlight the characteristics, advantages and disadvantages of sampling. Probability is a branch of mathematics that is capable of calculating the chance or likelihood of an event taking place in percentage terms. Probability is a measure of the likeliness that an event will occur. Probability has a scientific basis, and if you have, for example, 9 likelihoods and you want to calculate the probability of one event taking place, it is said that its probability is 1/9. Or the event has a 9% probability of taking place. Probability is used to quantify an attitude of mind towards some proposition of interest and towards some proposition of whose truth we are not certain. The proposition of interest is usually of the form will a specific event occur. The attitude of mind is the form of how certain are we that the event will occur. The certainty we adopt can be described in terms of a numeric measure, and this number between 0 and 1, where 0 indicates impossibility and 1 indicates certainty, we call probability. Thus, the higher the probability of an event, the more certain we are that the event will occur. Let's move on as we talk about population and sampling. A population can be defined as including all people or items with the characteristic one wish to understand. Sampling is a process used in statistical analysis in which a predetermined number of observations will be taken from a larger proportion. A probability sampling is one in which every unit in the population has a chance of being selected in the sample, and this probability can accurately be determined. Non-probability sampling is any sampling method where some elements of the population have no chance of selection, or where the probability of selection can be accurately determined. It involves the selection of elements based on assumptions regarding the population of interest, which forms the criteria for selection. Before, there is very rarely enough time or money to gather information from everyone or everything in a population. The goal becomes finding a representative sample or a subset of that population. The methodology used to sample from a larger population will depend on the type of analysis being performed, but will include simple random sampling, systematic sampling, and observational sampling. The sample should be a representation of the general population. Now let's talk about let's move on as we talk about the types of probability sampling. Some examples of probability samplings. One will be the sample random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified sampling, and so on and so forth. About non-probability sampling. Non-probability sampling is any sampling method where some element of the population have no chance of selection, or where the probability of selection can be accurately determined. It involves the selection of elements based on assumptions regarding the population of interest, which forms the criteria for selection. Hence, because the selection of element is non-random, non-probability sampling does not allow the estimation of sampling errors. This condition gives rise to exclusion bias, placing limits on how much information a sample can provide about the population. Information about the relationship between sample and the population is limited, making it difficult to extrapolate some extrapolate from the sample to the population. Non-probability also have some sampling method, which include accidental sampling, quarter sampling, and purposive sampling. Sampling methods. A variety of sampling methods can be employed individually or in combination. Factors commonly influencing the choice between this design include: number one, nature and quality of the frame; number two, availability of auxiliary information about units on the frame; number three, accuracy requirements and the need to measure accuracy; whether detailed analysis of the sample is expected; and lastly, cost or operational concerns. So these are some of the factors that influence the choice of sampling method. Let's talk about sampling methods. Sampling method has two types. We have two types of sampling method. We have probability sampling and non-probability sampling. Under probability sampling, we have cluster sampling, simple random sampling, systematic sampling, and stratified sampling. Another non-probability sampling, we have accidental sampling, quarter sampling, and purposive sampling. But we are going to explain some of this. But under probability sampling, let's first of all talk about simple random sampling. In a simple random sample, SRS, of a given size, all such subsets are given an equal probability. Furthermore, any given pair of elements has the same chance of selection as any other such pair. This minimizes bias and simplifies analysis of results. What about systematic sampling? Systematic sampling relies on arranging the study population according to some ordering scheme and then selecting elements at regular intervals through that ordered list. Let's talk about cluster sampling, which is under probability sampling. Sometimes it is more cost-effective to select respondents in groups. Sampling is often clustered by geography or by time periods. Nearly all samples are in some sense clustered in time, although this is rarely taken into account in the analysis. For instance, if surveying households within a city, we might choose to select 90 city blocks and then interview every household within the selected block. Clustering can reduce travel and administrative cost. Let's move on as we talk about quarter sampling, which is one of the types of non-probability sampling. In quarter sampling, the population is first segmented into mutually exclusive subgroups. Then judgment is used to select the subject or unit from which segment based on a specified proportion. For example, an interviewer may be told to sample 200 females and 300 males between the age of 45 and 60. In quarter sampling, the selection of the sample is non-random. For example, interviewers might be tempted to interview those who look most helpful. The problem is that these samples may be biased because not everyone gets a chance of selection. This random element is its greatest weakness, and quarter versus probability has been a matter of controversy for several years. Accidental sampling, which is another type under non-probability sampling, is sometimes refers to grab convenience or opportunity sampling. Accidental sampling is a type of non-probability sampling which involves the sample being drawn from that part of the population which is close to hand. That is, a population is selected because it is readily available and convenient. It may be through meeting the person or including a person in the sample when one meets them, or chosen by finding them through technological means such as the internet and through phone. The researcher using a such sample cannot systematically make generalizations about the total population from this sample because it will not be representative enough. Let's random sampling. Let's talk about the basic principle of sampling. Theory of sampling is based on the following laws. Number one, law of statistical regularity, and number two, law of inertia of like numbers. Let's explain what law of statistical regularity means. This law comes from the mathematical theory of probability. According to him, law of statistical regularity says that a moderately large number of the items chosen at random from the large group are almost sure on the average to possess the features of the large group. According to this law, the units of the sample must be selected at random. Law of inertia of large numbers. According to this law, the other things being equal, the larger the size of the sample, the more accurate the result are likely to have. What are the characteristics of the sampling technique? Number one, it is more cheaper. Number two, it saves time. It is more reliable. It is very suitable for carrying out different surveys. And lastly, it can be used. It is scientific in nature. It is scientific in nature. Let's move on as we talk about the advantages and disadvantages of sampling. The advantages of sampling are, number one, very accurate. Accuracy is more of accuracy in sampling. Number two, economical is economical in nature. Number three is very reliable. But the disadvantages are, number one, inadequacy of the samples. Number two, chances of bias. And number three, problems of accuracy. I hope you have learned one or two things in this study section, and I hope that you will continue to learn more in the subsequent study section. See you in the next slide. Thank you for listening.